Italian exhibition is a 45-minute presentation that we researched for the entirety of semester 2 to give our exhibition in front of a panel of judges. Our panel of judges rate our presentation, and that determines whether or not we get our diploma. So first off, I would like to start with my copyright disclaimer. The materials included in this presentation are included under the fair use exemption of the U.S. copyright law, are prepared according to the Educational Multimedia Fair Use Guidelines, and are restricted from further use. So first things first, I'd like to introduce you to my panel members. I have Mr. Sage, who is my coach through this entire process. I have Mr. Wagner, who is a woodshop teacher here at North Kansas City High School. I have Ms. Epperson, who is the band director at North Kansas City High School. Ms. Harkins, who is the elementary school counselor at Fox Hill Elementary School. And Dr. Donnelly, who is the vice principal at Fox Hill Elementary School and Chapel Hill Elementary School, and actually just got hired as the principal of Oakwood Manor. Oakwood Manor. I was like, it's one of the two. All right, so that's my panel, and I really appreciate you all coming to be here. It means a lot. So first things first, I want to get you introduced into why I picked this topic. So as you can see, this is a map of Southern Africa. This country right here is Malawi. I have family who lives in Malawi. My dad's sister lives in Malawi with her husband Moffat. And they own an orphanage and adopted 12 boys a few years back, quite a few years back now. And so when my aunt came to America for a visit to get some medical treatment, she came to Kansas City to visit my dad and myself and my mom. And she told me some stories. But I just want to before I tell you the story, I'm going to put this map in your head because this is Malawi, but then I moved to South Africa from having some technical difficulties getting information on Malawi. And so what led me to my question is a story of my family. These 12 boys actually didn't understand that women had feelings. So my aunt was telling me a story about the first time that she had met these boys, and they didn't understand that. They didn't know that women could feel mad and sad and happy and frustrated or feel all of them at the same time, just like men could. In Malawi, at about the age of 9, the boys are sent out on their own. You fend for yourself, you can go to school if you feel like it, you don't have to if you don't want to. You're finding a wife to create your family and have children for. That's your job as a man. And as a woman, you're genuinely just treated as a household slave. So, at about the age of 9 also, you are pulled from school to stay at home with your mother. And you learn how to take care of children and how to cook and how to clean because that's your job. That's what you're supposed to be there to do at all times. And that amazed me because in our society here, that's not the norm any longer. And we let women do what they want. And so I wanted to know what caused the people to feel that women didn't have feelings. And so I started looking into the education system in South Africa to see why students leave, or in Malawi, to see why students leave, to see why they aren't staying. And I couldn't find enough information, so then I decided to stay within the continent of Africa and move to South Africa. So this led me to my essential question, which is, what are the major weaknesses of the South African education system? So first things first, I would like to define weakness. Weakness is defined by Merriam-Webster as a quality or feature that prevents someone or something from being effective or useful. So that's the definition that I would like to run with throughout my presentation. So I would like to show you my 3 subpoints. Well, first we have to understand how the education system works. So you start with grades 0, 0, 0, or 000 through 9. That's free education for any student in South Africa. So you're able to find some sort of education if you can't afford anything else. So then once you've completed grade 9, you have the opportunity to pay for grades 10 through 12. So by paying for grades 10 through 12, you can go to on-the-job training, you can go through schooling like the classes that we have here, or there are lots of different options for you. But once you hit grade 12, towards the end of the year, you have to take a test called the Bachelor Pass. And to get your Bachelor Pass, you have to get a certain score on all of these tests that to look up the distance that is required for students to travel to their schools every day and came across a website for the World Bicycle Relief Project, or BEAP, the Bicycle Education Empowerment Program in South Africa. The World Bicycle Relief Project provides students with bicycles who have to go really long distances to get to school. And they take donations, and then they turn those into bicycles, and they're actually based out of Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. So they provided me with the information that I was looking for, and they got all their information from the statistics of South Africa, which are released every year by the government, and they have things like the distance for students to get to school, the distance for parents to get to work, the amount of average pay for certain jobs, different things like that. So this document states that 8 million students walk to school every single day, and 2 million must walk about 6 kilometers every day. So this far map over here is the 3 kilometers one way. Your starting destination is the Poor Boys that is up North Oak, so right up the street from the school. So you would have to start there, walk all the way down to this school here, which is your ending destination, which would take approximately 34 minutes, and then you have to walk back in the evening. Now this is sunshine, extreme heat, rain, anything. So that's 2 million of the students. Another 1 million students must walk 12 kilometers a day, or 6 kilometers each way, which levels out to about 4 miles. So this starting point here is actually the Wendy's or Sam's Club up North Oak. So you have to walk from there all the way down to North Kansas City High School in whatever weather, leaving at least an hour and a half of that early just so that you can get there. And then you have to walk all the way back in the evenings. So on the days where it's raining, it can be extremely difficult for students to be able to get to school on time. That is why the World Bicycle Relief Project is such a really great program, because when a student gets a bike, it can cut 75% of the time that it takes for a student to get to school out of their time. So you're getting out of the really terrible weather a lot faster. So the distance for some students who don't have the opportunity to, say, take a taxi to school in the rain can be an extreme difficulty and a weakness in the education system because they don't provide the means for the students to actually make it to school. So then we want to talk about facilities. So something that I know that I take advantage of every single day is having a working bathroom. So in structures like these, you don't have the opportunity to really have a functioning restroom. So with the problems with the buildings that they often don't have restrooms, and if they do, it's often a hole in the ground, or it may have a seat on it, or it may not. But as pictured here, these young boys across this fence line are actually just using the restroom at the fence line because that's the only bathroom that they have the opportunity to get to. So something that really stuck with me was that in 2014, a young boy drowned in a pit latrine. Now, this next picture is kind of gross, but this is actually the pit latrine in which this boy drowned in. His name was Michael Combe. And Michael had just started school. He had been in school for about 3 weeks. He's starting in grade 000 and fell in and didn't know how to swim and drowned. So the lacking facilities that these schools aren't providing for their students can cause physical damage to students or could kill them if they don't understand how to use the bathrooms properly. So the lacking facilities that students don't have the opportunity to have to, as well as the schools that are in shambles a lot of the time, or not knowing from day to day where you're actually going to be attending school, is a weakness in the education system that should be addressed by the government, because if they want their students to have the opportunity to learn in a safe environment, then they need to correct the structural difficulties and the locational problems that the students have when getting to school. So, I have just covered location and facilities. I now want to cover the racial inequalities that happen in the South African education system. And then I want to cover the teachers. So moving forward with racial inequalities. First things first, you're going to have to understand some history about South Africa. So I want to cover the apartheid. Apartheid is defined by Merriam-Webster's dictionary as a former social system in South Africa in which Black people and people from other racial groups, did not have the same political and economic rights as white people and were forced to live separately from white people. So that you get a better idea on how the whole thing worked, I'm going to play a video from AJ Plus, which is an online app on your phone, or you can watch them on YouTube and they give educational videos. And this one is covering the apartheid.
Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first democratically elected president in 1994. It was the official end of white minority rule, otherwise known as apartheid. Apartheid, you've heard of it, but what exactly was it? I'm Francesca Fiorentini, and this is AJ Plus. Apartheid is an Afrikaans word that means separateness. It was a system of racial segregation that governed South Africa for nearly 50 years. It specifically aimed to protect the domination of the white South Africans over non-whites in every aspect of life. But it didn't just appear out of thin air. During the colonial round for the country between the Dutch-descended Afrikaners and the British, the rights of native black South Africans were sidelined. So when apartheid was officially made law in 1948 by the Afrikaner-led National Party, it was a continuation of injustices already happening. Afrikaners believed that South Africa was their God-given homeland, and that the white race was superior. The black majority was therefore seen as a threat. There were 148 apartheid laws. Blacks had to carry ID permits at all times and had to obey strict curfews. Public facilities were separated for white and non-white use, and marriages between whites and other races were banned. People were classified into 4 racial categories: white, black, Indian, and colored, people of mixed race. And they were all separated into different residential areas. Blacks were divided into 10 so-called homelands based on tribal groups. Homelands were rural, overcrowded, and lacked jobs, forcing blacks to seek work as migrant laborers. Wages were low, and it was illegal for workers to strike. See, apartheid was also economically motivated. A cheap workforce was needed, particularly to work in the country's gold mines. Powerful mining magnates had a huge stake in apartheid policies, since their profits depended on keeping black wages low. Outside their designated homelands, non-whites had no political rights. Since they were not technically citizens, they couldn't vote. Education also divided. The state set up a separate education system for blacks that received a fraction of the funding that white schools did. Mandatory education ended at age 13 and was structured to funnel blacks into menial migrant labor. Exploitation by design. Needless to say, there was resistance to these insane laws. Protests were often led by black students and youth and were met with severe repression. Out of these struggles came leaders like Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Walter Sisulu, who would help bring an eventual end to apartheid. So now that you know what apartheid was, could you imagine living under it?
Could you? I know that I couldn't imagine living again under something like this. I couldn't imagine having that type of a situation where I'm not allowed to leave my home at certain hours, or I can't vote on my own, or if I'm caught with that ID, I can be arrested. So in 1994, the apartheid did end. But some of the apartheid-like dimensions are still in the South African society today. So, when she talked about the black Africans being put in homelands, these pictured here are the different homelands. As you can see, these colored portions are the 10 homelands, and this whole area over here was for white only. So they segregated their people to the point of which one half of the country was white and the other half was essentially colored or Indian or black. Now in 1994, when the apartheid laws were lifted, they were allowed to move. But that would be like me telling you that you've lived in Kansas City for all of your life, your family is here, your house is here, your friends are here. Oh, but you can move today. You wouldn't move, you've established yourself here. So there's still a boundary between the two races, between the essentially 4 races in their time, and it's not living. So, in a documentary that I watched by Stefan Godfrey, he interviewed a man named Warren Schmidt, who was the principal of Victoria Girls' High School in South Africa, which is a former white school in Gramerstown and is now a private school. He said that 90% of his girls in his school had passing grades enough to continue on to universities at the end of 2014. So I found that very interesting. So he he himself then stated that 66% of the spots in his school are reserved for middle-class families. So I was thinking about America, and the middle-class family has most of the time been one of the most common households. But in South Africa, there are 51.8 million people, and 13.5% of them are middle-class families. So 66% of the spots, 2/3 of their school is for the 13.5% of the population of the school. As we were looking at the different schools within the township, which a township is very similar to how Gladstone is inside of Kansas City. A township is a smaller area and is usually more rural. So if you're looking at the schools in Gramerstown, there are 3 former white schools in Gramerstown, which are now private schools, including Victoria Girls High School, which are pictured here. 98.5% of the students had passing grades and were able to get out of 12th grade without failing. And 80% of their students got bachelor passes and were capable of continuing on to universities. Now in the township, which are the free and public schools that they're able to go to, and then 10th through 12th grade, which you have to pay at least a portion of, 50% of their students had passing grades when they exited out of 12th grade. And 11% of them were capable of getting their bachelor pass. So as you can see, there's a huge difference between the inner city, essentially the inner city schools that are free and the private school educational opportunities. So this mother, who's pictured here, and this is her daughter, who is about to go into 2nd grade now, the mother had been trying to get the daughter into one of the private schools in Gramerstown for years. And ever since she was starting in grade 000, they had attempted to have this student put into the private school. Now, this student right here, her best friend is white. And her best friend made it right in. Her best friend did not have to be put on a waiting list or have to go through the application process or be suggested by the township schools to go to the private school because she was capable of having a very brilliant mind. This little girl did and didn't make it in. Because they said that they didn't have enough room for another student, yet they let her best friend in. This mother said that to get into private schools, it only leaves you with one option, and that one option is the township schools. And she said that she didn't know what type of future her child would have going to the public schools, and she didn't know what would come of her child. And that can be very, very difficult on a mother. So now I would like to show you a video called The First Follower to show how in a movement you already have the first followers in South Africa. These parents are your first followers.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out, you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut, and it's not 2 nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers, because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
As you can see by that video, the first followers are already there. The parents are there. They want to support their children into going into private school education. They just need somebody to make a movement. And somebody that could make that movement would be very similar to the principal of the Victoria Girls High School, which would be Warren Schmidt. And if he started that movement, he already has followers. So he's already made that first big step. So later I was watching another documentary, and they interviewed this man named Nick Spall, who is a university lecturer and educational researcher. And he said you basically have two South Africas within the one South Africa. And this largely follows the apartheid type dimensions. He showed the two classes like a cycle. The upper portion, which is the 20% of the middle class and upper class, perpetuates only itself. They go to the same schools, they function as one. The lower 80%, which is here, functions as another separate entity. There's no reason for them to blend together, because if you can afford a private school education, why wouldn't you take it? So those who are in the private school education system stay within that 20% circulating within themselves, and the people who can't afford it stay beneath them in the 80% who can't make it to blend the two. So just to put the amount of difference between the upper class and middle class to the lower classes, the two richest people in South Africa have the same wealth as 50% of the population combined. So those two richest people could take all of the money from those 50% and have everything that they earn in a year. So there is a striking difference between the upper classes and the lower classes. It's a constant cycle in which the people in the most poverty-stricken areas are continuing in that area and aren't getting the chance to escape, because if they don't have the money to necessarily pay for a better education, there's no way for them to get out of that low slump and continue on. So I think that racial inequalities are a weakness in the education system, because the education system is not pushing them to blend. They're not pushing the upper classes to blend with the lower classes and function as one rather than two. So, to answer my essential question, what are the major weaknesses of the South African education system? I have looked at the location of facilities, I've looked at racial inequalities, and now I want to cover teachers. So I interviewed Dr. Teboho Moja, who is a professor of higher education at New York University Steinhardt, with a focus on the South African education system. She has also held many positions in universities in South Africa, including being appointed chair of the council at the University of South Africa. In my interview, we spoke about the different requirements and training that a person has to go through to become a teacher in South Africa and how they've changed over the course of South Africa's lifetime. So to start, during the apartheid, you were required to have an education through 9th grade, which means that you could have a completely free education and then go through and get 2 years of teacher training, and then you were a teacher. So let's put this all into our minds. We're going to travel back to freshman year in high school, and if you're a freshman, let's just imagine. So we're all back to 2 years later, you find out you're going to be a 12th grade history teacher. You enter into your 12th grade classroom and you're super excited, and you look around and those are all your old friends who got to continue. So you're now teaching the students who have been able to gain the education that you didn't, and you're now supposed to teach them something that they don't know about, and you haven't even been able to continue through the school system to get the education that they have. So after the apartheid ended in 1994, they changed the education laws, the teacher education laws, to require education through 12th grade. So you could go through free 9th grade and then be part of that small percent who has the ability to pay for 10th through 12th grade. And then you went through another 2 years of training, which wasn't as big of an issue. But then they realized that you should probably have a college education. So now, as it stands, educators must have, through a 12th grade education, you must gain your bachelor pass, and then you have to continue to universities to get a 3 to 4 year degree, and then you have 1 year of teacher training, and then you're a teacher. But I still see a flaw in this. You can get any 3 to 4 year degree. So I want to be a chemical engineer. Okay? So I go to college, I get a 4-year chemical engineering degree, but I can't find a job. So I think to myself, what are the other options for me to do other than going into chemical engineering right away? Well, I can go through 1 year of teacher training, and I can just be a teacher until I find my dream job. So I go through 1 year of teacher training, and 6 months into my first year teaching, I find that dream job. I find it, and I'm so excited. Well, all that I have to do is put in 4 weeks' notice, and I'm out of teaching. I don't have to be a teacher anymore. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no problem. I'm out. So you're still lacking that passion that teachers want to have towards their students, because it's just something that you can very easily get. It doesn't require you to get a specific degree. You can just gain it. So when trying to figure out why, I found on gooverseas.com that the South African Education Department is losing 10,000 teachers a year, and only 6,000 are graduating from that 1 year of teacher training. I decided that I would try and approach the different ideas in which would cause a teacher to not want to be teaching. So I looked at the 9 most popular jobs in South Africa, and all of my information was from JobVine. And teachers, look at here. The most popular job in South Africa is actually the taxi driver. And as you can see, the blue is the least amount of money, the reported. The yellow is the median income for each job, and the red is the maximum. Now, this is all in rand, which is the local money in South Africa. And it's about 7 rand to every dollar. So the average teacher, as you can see here, makes about 158 rand, 158,000 rand a year, or around $12,900 in our money. So I was wondering if that would cover the cost of living. So then when I found this and found out that taxi driver is the most popular job, and its median income is well below 100,000 rand a year, I can't imagine people wanting to do a job so much, or having the abilities to do the job, but not having it paid for your living at home. And with a teacher's median salary being about 70,000 rand above, I would think that that would more than likely cover your household needs. So once I covered that pay wasn't really an issue, I was thinking, well, are they required to work 7 days a week and these ungodly hours and all these crazy things? So I found their contract through the Department of Education, and I found some points that I thought was kind of interesting. So in a cycle of 36 months, you are allowed the amount of sick leave that you would normally work in a 6-week period. So if you work 6 weeks at 5 days a week, that's 30 days off for 3 years, which is 10 days a year, which is actually the amount of leave that our teachers are allowed here in the North Kansas City School District for pay. So then, after you have that, you also get 3 days of family responsibility leave during each leave cycle, which is 6 weeks. So if a very close family member passes away, you have 3 days. Then I thought about overtime. Do they get overtime? If you work an extra 3 hours a day other than get 1.5 times your regular pay at a maximum of 10 hours a week. So you do have overtime. And if you work on a Sunday or a public holiday, you actually get 2 times the amount of money that you would regularly be making. But it's still, are you working these crazy hours then? You are required to have a mandatory off period of 12 hours every day. So if you come into work at 6 a.m., you have to leave by 6 p.m. because you have to have 12 hours before coming back. Then you also have to have a 36-hour off period weekly. So you have to have some type of a weekend or you are not allowed to come back in until you have finished it. So I don't think that they're obviously not working some kind of crazy amount of hours unless they're doing it unpaid. And so finally I thought of maternity leave. A lot of women want to become mothers, and actually in South Africa you get 4 months of maternity leave. It does not necessarily have to be paid, and you do have the opportunity to discuss with your employer, as is stated in the contract, what kind of money that you would be open to receiving throughout that period, which often is half your pay or sometimes your whole pay. So maternity leave was not necessarily an issue. So as I was going through the contract, I was finding more and more that their contract doesn't seem completely unreasonable. So it led me to believe that maybe the teachers are lacking passion. But after watching documentaries of teachers talking, I don't think that they're lacking passion towards the students. I think that they're lacking passion towards the actual system. So as you're about to see in this next video, you're going to watch a teacher talk about the frustrations she has with the upper levels in her school towards their facilities. And then you're going to hear a dad talk about his frustrations towards the teachers.
But nothing. Since 2005, they are promising, but nothing has happened. We must be treated equally, I say, because there are schools that are built, but same learners are in a math school. Why?
Kamzundana iminyaka inyuka aze abenza improve esikolweni ilondo yakhe no ingane ndawuningi kamzundana iminyaka yakhe Eleven years of age, grade 3. Ikhona iyaqala nje bayikhona into engathi mamiyo. Ino-BP. Umisi uyakhalaza, tata, umntana unengxaki. Nam ndinengxaki umntana. When it comes ndinika umntana umsebenzi, ndizokuncedisa endlini. Hayi ndaba enxambi sithi u-alo. Asikakhe kuqala khaya.
What can a parent be expected to do for their child when their teacher is almost giving up on them? But it's not because the child is unteachable. The students go to school and try and do their best, just like we do here most of the time. And the teachers get frustrated because they're trying to teach these students, but let's say you're 11 years old and supposed to be in 5th or 6th grade, and you're still in 3rd grade. It's tough to finally get you moving forward. And the parents are frustrated that the teachers aren't doing it, and the teachers are frustrated that the aboves aren't doing it. The people above them aren't doing that. So now I would like you to hear from a person from the Department of Education in the Eastern Cape explaining the cycle of blame that tends to occur.
This whole scale application of responsibility parents now expect a teacher just to discipline their child. The teacher blames the principal and the school management team for not giving them enough time or for overworking them, and that's why their kids are failing. The principal is blaming the circuit manager that he never visits my school, is not supporting him. The circuit manager blames the district director. The district director blames the executive management here. So there's that citing. No one wants to take responsibility for their failures.
So if nobody wants to take responsibility for the failures that are occurring in the schools, how do you expect the students in their education to get any better? How do you want your society to grow? So it's not so much that the teachers don't have passion towards teaching all the time. It's more or less that they're tired of being told that things would get fixed and it not happening. So I believe that teachers are a weakness in the education system because they're losing their passion towards teaching, but I don't think it's completely their fault. I think that the school system needs to be looked at by the government because the apartheid-like functions that were applied throughout time are still hanging around. They're still separating the schools and not having them function as one. And so I think that if that is addressed by the government, this weakness in the education system can finally be corrected. So I have approached vocation and facilities, racial inequalities, and then finally teachers to answer my question of what are the major weaknesses of the South African education system. I think that location and facilities are a weakness in the education system because sometimes it prevents students from being able to go to school. It prevents them from having the opportunities to learn. And I think that if those were corrected, if their funding was able to be so that they could take children to school or find a way to eliminate the problems that they have, like the facilities, then the weakness can be corrected. The racial inequalities that are still hanging around from when the apartheid was going on are a huge weakness in the education system because it's still dividing its people. It's still giving a minority rule more power over the education system because they're able to pay to get the better education that they want for their students. But just as you saw, that father wants a good education for his child too and should not have to be penalized because he cannot afford it. And finally, I think that the teachers are a weakness in the education system that is not completely their fault. But if they really tried and started a movement, I'm sure that the parents would be willing to follow to continue and better the education system. So the next time that you're dreading coming to school because you just don't feel like doing it, imagine those inner city schools who commonly don't have the MacBook Airs like we do and all of these projectors and these fancy equipments and all the different things that we're provided with. Think about them. Think about the students in South Africa who want to go to school but don't have the educational opportunities to because maybe they can't get there that day or their mom is sick. So we take for granted the opportunities that we're given, and I think that the next time that you're just dreading that day in school, at least you have a school that's standing and toilets that work and teachers who generally enjoy being around you all on most days. Because, I mean, we all know we can be kind of irritated sometimes. So I want to end my presentation with two quotes. The first one being from Mrs. DiGregorio. She stated this in class one day. Education is freedom. And if South Africa ever wants to offer freedom for their people, then they need to learn how to better educate their students. And if people want freedom, then they need to gain knowledge. And to quote Schoolhouse Rock, knowledge is power. don't have the large summer breaks like we do. It's mostly year round. So like their schooling system, their schooling year starts in January, and so then you function all the way, or you go all the way through December, and then you change grades once January approaches again if you have the opportunity to change grades. Yes.
I don't know if you know much about the teacher on your program, or would you say that's similar to like teacher certification?
I'm not actually familiar with it, but probably because the training that goes on in South Africa isn't very much at all. It's very small. It's just a year, and basically you go through a training that just tells you here's how you handle children. You know, it's not anything specific to the education system. So I don't know if that's similar to it, but that's what happens.
I think Teach for America has like 2 years of training, and then they throw them into inner city schools.
Yeah. Well, actually on the website gooverseas.com, it's actually searching for teachers from other countries to come to South Africa to help with their education shortage. And the difference between the year 2008 and 2011 in the amount of teachers that were leaving every year was 4,000 teachers. So it's happening very quickly. So they're trying to find educators from other areas to fulfill their teaching needs.
Okay, so you know how like Malala, we love her in the West, and she's a big like advocate for education. But then when like the Peshawar attack happened in her native country, it was overlooked by the media, and then like the attack in the university in Kenya happened, it's pretty much been like kept on the down low. So why do you think that we care? Like we very much like project this idea that education is important, yet for some reason it doesn't get like as much social activism as other like problems, or we don't seem to like really push for it. We're just like, yay, education, but we don't do much for it.
Well, I think that our country as a whole does have a very different idea of education than a lot of other countries. Very similar to the story that I stated about Malawi, and the boys don't have to go to school and the women are pretty much pulled out of school. I think it's because a lot of countries don't have it's not as much of an importance to them as it is, and so the political problems that they're having tend to make the news more often because the students aren't able to have a voice, and so they're not causing very much of an actual change, and so it's ignored because a lot of people assume, well, that's just how their culture runs, that students don't want to have an education. But as I saw in a lot of the documentaries that I watched, there are a lot of students who really want to have a great education there, and they're just not given the opportunities that they need to have that education. Yes, Josh?
How much is tuition in some of the universities in South Africa, and is it at all affordable for most?
The universities or grades 10 through 12?
Both.
Both? Okay. Well, grades 10 through 12 is approximately 10 to 12,000 rand a year, which would equal out to like just over $2,000. And then it's slightly higher for universities, but it's not out of reach. There aren't a lot of scholarship programs in South Africa. They do allow students who want to go through grades 10 through 12 sometimes to have a lowered amount of tuition that they have to pay because their family doesn't have enough income, but they don't really have scholarships like we have here where you just apply for a whole bunch of them and hope to get some. They don't really have those at all. So it's pretty much if your family can't pay for it, you're not going. Yes, Danielle.
Is there anything that like the government in South Africa or any of these other countries there, is there anything that they're trying to do to like improve their education systems or like lessen the inequality in education?
Well, see, the South African education system at the moment, the government is trying to tell the people that everything is fine, that the education system is not having any problems, when in reality they're having a lot of problems. And so they're just kind of denying it at the moment. When they changed the law for teachers to have a college degree, they had changed a lot of educational laws about like gender inequalities and different things like that. But they're not necessarily changing anything. And so when the apartheid ended in 1994, a lot of the money that the government had been spending on other things was turned towards the education system. And so they did apply a lot of money, but since the government was still mostly ruled by white people, it was a lot of the money was still put towards the primarily white schools and not the more rural schools. So they still don't have the funds, and they think that they've evened it out for the students, but as the teachers state, they don't actually have the money that they need to like change their facilities. And a lot of students in the schools go to what's called a mud school. And a mud school is, as it sounds, it is a school built for mud. And one of the promises after the apartheid ended was that they were going to erase all mud schools, yet there are still learners who are still learning in mud schools, even though they've stated multiple times that it will change, and it hasn't. So they're just kind of trying to change it, but it's not actually doing anything.
So is it each township is responsible for their own school funding? Is it the government? How do they determine?
So they have taxes just like we do, and so the government runs all the schools, but like Eastern Cape has one department, and then the Western Cape has the other department. So like it's basically split down the middle. So the Eastern Cape is the primarily more rural area, and so they have taxes, but because of the people not having as much money, they don't have as much taxes, which means that they don't have as much taxes to go towards the schools. And so then the schools aren't able to be rebuilt since it's not one functioning system. Yes, Julie?
Okay, so you mentioned that facilities are a problem in the education system, and obviously if you're going to improve facilities, you need increased funding.
Yeah.
So where do you think that funding should come from?
Okay, that's a good question. So the funding that's separated out in South Africa, it kind of just disappears, actually. A lot of the money that goes into the government is put towards things like, it's put more towards paying the people who are working there rather than the actual system in which they're running. Does that make sense? So the people are getting paid a lot that work in the government, and then the tax money that is thusly put towards the schools gets slowly decreased and decreased and decreased, and they don't have that much money anyway, especially in the Eastern Cape that's more rural, and so that causes problems. The only way that I can see them getting more money is if they were to combine the two and have the Western Cape help with the Eastern Cape, since it's such a large difference in educational opportunities between the two, and open up more private schools to allow for students who don't have necessarily all of the money that they need to go to that school. Make sense? Okay. Wayne?
Do you think, like, if the teachers actually start a quick movement, like, do you actually think they will eventually?
I think that they will eventually. A lot of people have, like, not necessarily tried, but it's starting to develop into a movement. And there have been a lot of recent documentaries created on how the apartheid hasn't completely vanished out of South Africa. And because of that, it has caused educational problems such as gender inequality in the schools. And so they're starting to make that movement, and the people are starting to want that change and really, like, grinding for it, but they just need somebody to actually start the movement, and that's where the resistance comes from, is because like principals of the schools don't necessarily want to change because that decreases the amount of money that they'll be making. So it's just somebody needs to actually make the movement, and I think that they do want it, it's just they can't find the person to start it. Does that answer your question? Anybody else have questions? Yes, Charles.
Can you go a little in depth on their curriculum, what it consists of, who makes it, and why they think it's adequate?
Okay, the Department of Education creates their education requirements. It's very similar to here, where you have to meet certain testing guidelines and things like that. So they have English, math, science, and history, just like we do. They don't really do the arts quite as much. They have like art classes, but they don't have things such as band or orchestra and things like that. A lot of it's from funding. And so they'll go through those classes, and then once you get to grades 10 through 12, you actually have the choice. So you can go to like on-the-job training, where you can actually learn a job-specific education, or you can pick just history, or you can pick just math, or you can pick all of them, or you can just pick going to like art classes, which are more provided in the paid-for schools. But the Department of Education in South Africa is who runs what they are allowed to teach from. And so most teachers are actually required to teach out of one specific book for each grade level. And they can't really teach anything else other than what's in that book, because that's all that they're provided with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
In your opinion,
or
Whatever. What do you think would benefit them the most?
I think the first thing that they really would benefit them and create the biggest difference would be to either create more schools or extremely better the schools that they have now. So rebuilding the roofs so that they don't possibly cave in a rainstorm, rebuilding the facilities that the students have the opportunities to go to, because oftentimes if the school is falling apart, they can stay home and be safer than being at school, because at school they might have a tin roof that could come caving in at any moment in rain, but at home they might have a solid foundation. So I think that correcting the facility problems that they have would make more students first want to come. And then it would also make it easier for teachers to teach, because then they wouldn't possibly be teaching off a little chalkboard that's like this big. They could have like an actual chalkboard and write things out and have things like that. So I think that if the buildings and structural problems that they have were corrected, it would help a lot first and foremost. Yes.
You talked a lot about like some of those problems and how their education system works, and I'm curious as to like students with disabilities or like learning disabilities or things like that, how they're dealt with in the school system.
It's actually quite interesting. They're not changed. They are in the same class as all the other students. Teachers aren't really prepared, or they aren't really taught how to teach students with special needs. So oftentimes a student who has special needs will be held back in grades because they don't understand what's happening. But that's because teachers don't really know how to teach them. And so I think that if they were to create a special ed department or a special ed program for the schools, it would help a lot, because the students who have special needs are kind of just put to the back burner because they just don't know how to approach them. Make sense? Any other questions? Oh, hello.
So also, like, obviously South Africa is super diverse and there are a lot of different languages that different ethnic people speak. And for instance, there was the dad who was like speaking in his own ethnic language. And I was wondering, like, is like education taught just in like English or Afrikaans? And is it like available in other languages? And it's like, you know, essentially like if you're a Hispanic student here, like, and if you don't know, English, are you going to have to fail because you don't know the language, and is that setting you back?
Yeah. Well, they have opportunities for students to go to schools in their own native language. Once they enter into grades 000, they will not only be learning their native language of the area, but they'll also be learning English or Afrikaans or however. That's the language that they'll learn. But they also are provided with education in their own language. It's just far less common than an English-speaking language. They have 4 main languages spoken within their schools, and I cannot pronounce any of the 3 other than English, because nope, not happening. And so there are schools provided with those 3 languages, but most schools are taught in English because that's what they start teaching in grade 0. Anybody else?
Oh my God,
Jack?
Jack.
Why is it 000?
000. That's like pre-kindergarten here. And so then you go through like 2 years of pre-K, so that's grades 000 and 0, and then you have grade 0, which is kindergarten, and then you start grade 1. Yeah, yes.
In like 5 years' time, do you think the education system will stay where it is, or do you think it'll improve?
I think that by 5 years passing, somebody will have made a movement to change it. I think that something will have occurred that will, like, someone will lead a movement to overhaul the education system and really find a better way to go about things within 5 years. I don't think that it's going to happen within the next year, because I don't think that enough people are really provided with enough information on it to create a big movement, but I think that within the next 5 years it would definitely happen. Anybody else have any questions? Maybe? No?
Hey, I'm going to do it right.